I'm here tonight with Harrison Meagher, a fellow Czech holistic health coach. Harrison, how are you doing today?
I am so excited to be here, Nick. Thanks for having me.
I know it's early over in your area, but so far, what have you done? What unusual things have you done for your productivity and health?
So, in the morning when I get up, I have a couple of things that I go to, but I guess unusual is a cold shower because it's unusual in the way that it's bloody hard. So, and especially it's winter for me now in Australia, so that's top of my mind. I do. I'm really fascinated right now in the Tibetan rites, which is a flow of yoga moves that you can do in the morning to energize yourself if that cold shower isn't really isn't doing it for you, hasn't got you excited enough. The Tibetan rites is something I jump into, and then speaking. I've really noticed I'm really big at the moment. I'm spending a lot of my time on Clubhouse, and that's caused me to have a couple of mornings in my morning, a couple of hours in my morning where I've been speaking a lot. And I've noticed that really gets me going. When I'm sitting in my place of passion and purpose to start my day, that really sets up the rest of my day to go really well. So I guess that's what comes to mind.
That's an interesting one. The speaking, I do notice, has an energizing effect on me as well. And I generally don't like to do these late night, at least late night for
Mm,
me, shows because then my mind is racing after, then it makes sleep harder.
100%. Yeah, and yeah, notice the exact same thing.
Yeah. So, what's your backstory? How did you find Paul Chek and holistic health coaching?
It's a long story. I'll condense it and I'll try and give you the Cliff Notes version of it. But I spent many years sort of on the opposite end of the scale of what it means to be sort of holistically healthy, and a lot of drinking, a lot of bad food habits, sort of putting my body on the edge just for external pleasure. And those things are good in some regards, and I definitely don't look down on anyone that is doing that. But for me, I did it to an excess, and I eventually hit a wall uh, during a traumatic experience. And then once I hit that wall, I sort of had nowhere else to turn except for going inwards and going inside myself. And that inward journey caused me to really open up to not just my health, but my spirituality and what it meant to believe in something greater than myself, what it meant to love unconditionally, what it meant to be of service and support to other people. And that is what pulled me into the holistic health realm and the Czech paradigm in general.
In your view of the world, what would you say that are the pillars of holistic health?
Mm, good question. So how I view it, and it's very similar. I just my main education at the moment is from the Czech system, so I take a big chunk of it from there. But I go through six sort of lenses. I go through mindset, movement, nutrition, sleep, recovery, and stress management. And when someone comes to me with a challenge that they're going through, that's sort of the foundational and fundamental base that I start at, and then go from there in all those different directions and modify and adapt accordingly based off what comes up. Because as you probably know, we are very unique in our expressions in this world. And I think adaptability is key.
Are there any particular facets that you find tend to be common issues?
Mm. The emotional well-being within the sort of mindset, I count sort of emotional well-being in the mindset realm. And that is a big one at the moment that is really coming up for me and the people that are coming into my world to seek help and support, is the sort of energetic balance of where we're at. You can look at it from the chakra system, for example, with our heart energy center and our solar plexus energy center and our root and our sacral. And I'm really noticing right now that that is coming up a lot, especially in the world at the moment with the last year of things that we've been through. People are seeking uh, wanting to come back to a place of homeostasis from that emotional, energetic level.
And on that emotional, energetic level, how do you either as a individual or as a coach, go about assessing what spoke of the wheel, what chakra is misaligned?
The first step that I take, both in a professional setting with a client and also with myself, because I really come from the mindset of, I like to practice what I preach. So everything that I help and support people with, I'm doing in my life either daily or I've done very recently. And where I start with that specific question is I hold space, right? Hold space for myself or hold space for the person and allow what needs to come up to come up. And then from that place, then make a choice, right? Make a choice. Okay, so this person is talking about having troubles connecting to their tribe that they're currently in. Okay, so that means we should start from a root center. And
Mhm.
I'll skip to the end here. Most people, it comes from those first three energetic centers, the root, the sacral, and the solar plexus, because that is our animalistic needs. And a lot of us have troubles with those. But I basically start with the holding of space, allow the things to come up. And then from that need, the energetic centers can either be too open, blocked, or ideally balanced. And based off what comes up from that creation of space, we then take the steps needed from there. Make sense?
Yeah, and the primal energy centers are going to be misaligned or have more problems these days as we isolate from our tribes and we're secluded in our homes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And when you say that, I feel the connection to it, but I also feel very grateful because both you and I are being pulled in the direction of this kind of healing, and I don't think it's a coincidence, right? I don't think it's a coincidence that at this time in human experience and existence, with all these things going on, that people like you and myself are being pulled to this line of work. Is because as a global consciousness, it's needed.
Totally agree. What are some of the ancestral practices or nature therapy concepts you implement into your day?
Love these questions. They're so good. There's a couple. So, firstly, it's the sun. So as much as I can, I'm lucky enough to live in Australia on the beach. So I have quite
It's not
easy
bad.
access to the sun and nature. And I can either go out on my balcony and get some sun if my day is really busy, or if I have a little bit more time, I actually go down to the beach. So I get out into the sun and expose as much of my skin as possible to the sun. My neighbors probably don't like it, but a lot of that time is me just sort of being bare butt naked out on my balcony, getting in the sun, or if that's out on the beach, just getting all that sun. That's one.
Are you particular about the timing of the light exposure?
Yes, sort of. I flip back and forth on this. I know what you're getting at, and I flip back and forth on this idea of the timing. And where I'm at now with it, I think solar noon, middle of the day ish, is good, but you really have to listen to your body, right? So when I'm out in the sun, for example, getting as much skin exposure as I can, I listen to how my body's responding. If you're aware of this, there's something that called a solar callus that we all have, and your solar callus is your skin's ability to soak up the sun and not damage it, right? Like we have in our hands when we lift weights, we get a callus from the actual resistance. We also get a callus from the sun, and based off where that is in the development, my body's going to tell me it's going to start turning pink, and like, okay, now I need to step out of the sun. But if it's not turning pink, then I stay there longer to soak up more of the vitamin D. So round noon, and then listen to how my body responds.
In working your way up to longer
Yes,
periods in the
yes.
sun,
Mm-hmm.
because the sun isn't dangerous necessarily unless you are indoors all day and then spend 12 hours on the weekend out there.
Yes, I love that. Yeah, that is the one fact that I always drop with people when it comes to the relationship with the sun. Like there are studies showing now that comparing like people that work in offices, comparing people that work as street workers doing like the roads, and the people that are indoors all day get burnt more severely than the people that are outdoors all day exposing themselves to the sun. And that's exactly the point I was making before, is that the people that are out in the sun are building up their solar callus. So the sun isn't bad. It's just the indoor fluorescent lighting that a lot of us are exposed to these days damages our skin, and it damages our ability to receive the vitamin D. So yeah.
And I think that indoor office workers also have a higher incidence of melanoma and skin disease.
Yes. Yeah. Same study. Yep. And when you hear that, it's crazy to think, but yeah.
What kind of lighting do you have in your house?
Good question. I So I'm building up to actually trying to change all of my actual indoor fluorescent bulbs. At the moment, they're still the old-fashioned, but I actually, as soon as the sun goes down, the only light I have on, it's actually to my left here, is a salt lamp, is a red salt lamp. And as soon as the sun goes down, that's the only light I have on. And as soon as people hear that, like, how do you see? And my response to that is, you adjust, right? When you think what you're getting at here is, we've evolved from an ancestral perspective to, I love the glasses, good move. We've evolved from an ancestral perspective to the only light we saw after the sun went down was from fireside, from a fire, right? So we're used to red light. So in answer to your question, yeah, the only light I have on after sunset is a salt lamp.
I have a salt lamp in my room as well, and I generally wouldn't be using these bright white lights in the
Yeah.
evening, but sometimes you have to make sacrifices. So since I'm doing that, these glasses might help a little bit.
Yeah, and that's I think that's where I get so passionate about the sort of biohacking field, right? Is that it helps us do exactly what you just said. It helps us find the balance of living more ancestrally, but also taking advantages of the modern science that we use. That is amazing, right? I'm talking to you from the other side of the world right now. So of course, right, you want to find the balance there. You want to both live ancestrally, but also take advantage of experiences like this, which is, the glass.
The biggest problem I have with the term biohacking is that it implies we can successfully hack the body. And if you look at
Mm,
all the different things we try and hack it with, vitamin D supplementation, for example, is not the same as getting out and getting real sunlight. There's a
yes.
cascade of different benefits of sunlight. Whenever we isolate things and take a reductionist approach to systems, it doesn't work. So I
Mm,
prefer the terms bioharmonizing or biosynergizing instead.
yeah. Yeah, well, that's where the Ben Greenfields and the Dave Asprey and Luke Stories coalesce with the Paul Checks and the more sort of
Jack
ancestral
Cruz.
people, right? Yeah, yeah, those people coming together. Because yeah, I agree with you. I think while biohacking it's a good term, it does need to be questioned a little bit because it applies those things you're talking about, and we really want to get to a point where yeah, we're synergistically bringing it together in a harmonizing way that feels good for us.
Okay, so I interrupted you after your first item on your list. After light, what's next?
Grounding. So grounding is a big one for me. Both. So this is the good thing about going out in nature. It just ticks so many things at once, right? So I go out in nature, I get the sun. I go out in nature and ground. So I take my shoes off, go on the beach, go on the grass, go in the waves, right? We know that by connecting to the earth and the native EMF of the earth, that is an incredible anti-inflammatory process. So whether it's touching our feet, whether it's being in the energetic frequencies of the waves themselves washing over us, whether it's being in the forest, taking in the scents and the scenes, all of these things, being inside all day, working, doing things like this, again, wonderful, but inflammation is starting to go up. When we can ground, it allows it to release. The third point I would say is,
Before you go into the third point, have you tried the grounding or earthing mats? I'm currently standing on one right now to try and mitigate some of the EMFs and inflammation that's occurring from being on the fifth floor of a New York City apartment with all kinds of signals around me and pollution. And I don't think it's a perfect substitute for actual
yes,
skin exposure to the earth, but it's probably better than nothing.
yes, I agree. I don't have a one for my feet, but I have one here next to my keyboard that I use to rest my hands on. And yeah, like if I had to summarize it, exactly your point is, it's good enough. But if I have the choice of being on that, or I have 5 minutes where I can go run outside and just roll around on the ground, that's that's going to be so much better.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, anyone who goes outside for a period of time can feel how good it
Yes.
feels. They come back inside feeling refreshed and like a nice natural mood boost.
100%. And that is an awesome segue into the last sort of thing that I do in terms of connecting back into myself and getting out into nature and biohacking. Um, it's it's a spiritual practice, right? Any kind of spiritual practice I think is powerful, but for me, it's going inside of myself, whether it be some sort of TM meditation, whether it be connecting to loving affirmations, whether it's be visualization, or I work with a special kind of light technology that gets me into a deep meditation. But the idea here is connecting back into a deep knowing and a deep I call it love. People call it God, consciousness, universe. It's connecting back into that deep love. And going off what you said, when we get out into nature, it's not just doing all of those physiological things, the inflammation, the vitamin D, etc. It's also connecting to more of that oneness, right? Because nature, in my view, is just another expression of our deepness, our deep isness, whatever your name is for it. And when we're in nature, it reminds us of that. And suddenly all the limiting beliefs, all the insecurities, all the fears, all the thinking mind can easily settle down.
Do you think there's a way of being in nature that's wrong? For example, I've been reconsidering my like usual daily practice where I'll walk around the city, stop in a park, and I'll be reading on my Kindle the whole time or listening to a podcast, and I feel like I'm missing half the benefit by leaving the moment.
I wouldn't say it's wrong, but I don't think you're taking advantage of it to its highest degree. But the good thing about grounding, for example, being out in the ocean and on the sand or wherever, it's going to do the effects whether you're intentional about it or not. But when we add, we know this through the studies with water, for example, when we add our loving intention to anything outside of us, it impacts us, right? It's another example of that oneness that we all are. So when we're in nature and we're lovingly intending what we sort of want to get out of it, it's going to enhance it. So don't think it's wrong, but you could be getting more out of it, right?
For your working in practice, do you do anything that's active? I know you mentioned meditation and several others, but do you do any like light movement, yoga type stuff, or like Tai Chi?
I do. So first of all, Tai Chi, I would love to do more of. I haven't done much of it. I've only done it in terms of my training. It's something it's on my list to do a gong, for example, but I haven't built up to it yet. The one practice I do that is active, but still a working in practice is yin. I do yin yoga. So I'm a yin yoga teacher, but I just practice it daily because it's just the perfect way for me to, like you said, go inwards, but also release physical stress. Like we know that our joints and our connective tissue, our fascia, when we can give it time, especially in a yin yoga where we hold a pose for longer.
For my listeners, can you break down what yin yoga is?
Yeah. So there are many kinds of yoga, as we're aware of, but in my opinion, there's two main kinds. There's yang type yoga, which is the majority of them, which is sort of the fast sort of flowing yoga movements and the sun salutations and the hot yoga and again, they're all powerful and they're good, but there's and then there's yin yoga, which is you count it as actual yin itself or restorative. The one I do is yin. And yin is when we hold a pose, for example, Sphinx pose that people might know, where we're up like this and we're arching our back up. Instead of holding that for 30 seconds and then transitioning to the next pose, we hold it for 2 minutes, for 3 minutes. And what that does, it allows the intention to come from the muscles, and we relax the muscles and then switches to the joints, the bones, and the connective tissue. So it goes deep. And when we hold a pose like that for a longer period of time, it allows us to add a more meditative state to it, like the going inwards, and it allows deeper emotions to come up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and just from your description alone, it sounds much more restorative than some power flow, Bikram, 150-degree
Yeah.
typical yoga practice.
Yeah, and you can do it, like, you could do it anywhere, anytime. It's moving meditation, basically.
Tell me more about the role of quiet, active recovery, yoga, downtime, the whole yin side of things in your life.
So you already touched on it with working in, right? And I have a business, and I talk, and I help and support, and I train and do all these amazing things, all the things that I'm doing and ticking off and getting done and accomplishing and helping and supporting, and these are all great things. But if I'm doing these things 100% of the time, all the time, I'm going to hit a wall. I'm going to burn out. I'm going to get to a point where it just feels so overwhelming because I'm not slowing down. And the quiet time, the working in, the yoga, the meditation, the stillness, the being in nature, that allows me to go to the more yin, feminine side of things, where I'm not creating structure, I'm not completing, I'm flowing, I'm releasing, I'm slowing down, I'm being present of this moment that I'm in right now. And it's yin and yang, right? It's there's two forces in this universe that we all have to balance, and this is the balance, right? It's doing these quiet times and self-reflection and all these activities so we can have the power, have the energy, have the motivation to go back to the yang and get shit done.
Have you found it easy to flip between the two? For example, last week I pulled a bunch of 16-hour days, and I know that I should be going yin now and recovering, but I have a hard time unless it's scheduled in my calendar to actually follow through with it. I'd rather just
Mm.
keep working.
So my answer to that is an answer to what I do, because I go through the very similar mindset. And when I notice that happening, it's time for self-reflection. It's time for self-awareness. I ask myself, why am I going so hard right now? I'm not saying you're doing this, this is me, right? Why am I going so hard? Am I going so hard because this is something I'm enjoying and want to get done? Or am I going so hard because I'm maybe trying to ignore something that wants to come up, right? Because we know that when we slow down, that's when, like I said, with the yin yoga, that's when things can come up that need to be addressed. And going back to that energetic conversation we we're talking about at the start of the podcast, all of us are in that mindset right now of just going all the time and not allowing the things that need to come up in the space that's needed for them to come up. So when you ask me that question, how do I do that on the fly? If I notice myself doing that, self-awareness comes in. I ask myself, okay, am I doing this because it's supporting me, it's supporting other people, or am I doing this because I'm trying to escape something?
I've seen that you've amassed quite a following on Facebook. A lot of your posts are about self-love. What does that mean to you, and what do you do to love yourself?
I think we could make a whole podcast episode just on this topic alone. But I self-love means to me, I mean, it goes back to that consciousness piece, right? Self-love is not just putting myself first, looking after my health, looking after my food, looking after my movement practices and nature and all the things we've talked about. Self-love to me is connecting back to all that I am. My belief is that love is the foundation of everyone, right? But me right now, it's the foundation of me. And when I self-love myself, it's not only helping my health, but it's helping me connect back to fundamental truth. So that's, in a very in a 2-second analysis, that's what self-love means to me. When I try to practice self-love, it's doing all the things we've talked about today. It's doing it from a holistic lens, because I truly think that's what we are. We aren't, as you said, we aren't isolated beings that take isolated supplements to help us improve. We are a system of systems interconnected together, changing all the time. So if we can approach our self-love from that view, then it's going to be enhanced. So eating better things, going outside and moving ancestrally, connecting to the ground, sleeping in a environment that's conducive to recovery, things like that is how I connect to my self-love.
All the things you do to care for yourself and optimize yourself.
100%.
Okay. What are your thoughts around expectations versus intentions? This is a subject we talked about offline a while back.
I forgot about this. It's a good one. I deal a lot with this specifically in one of the services I offer people, well, in a couple of different services, but specifically in, I work with a light technology, and people come in and it's very meditation based, and they come in and I tell them to make an intention. And when people come in, they often get stuck between, they don't have an intention, they have an expectation. And in my view, an expectation, answering a question, an expectation is, I'm going to do this thing, I'm going to get this outcome. If I don't, then my expectation is not met and not achieved. An intention is, I'm going to do this thing, I am intending for this thing to come up, but the way that it comes up, the way that it manifests, the way that it gives me solutions and answers and all the things is going to have a life of its own, right? So intention is sort of allowing the creativity of life to occur, and expectation is setting strict parameters that a lot of the time you're going to be disappointed if they're not reached.
So expectation sets you up for potential disappointment.
Yes. Yeah.
And that potential often comes true because it's hard to confine life into a specific outcome.
Yeah. Nailed it.
Also, the Lucia light. I first heard about that on a different podcast a while back, and you mentioned that you're a practitioner of it. What is it, and why did you become a practitioner of a specific light device?
During this Chek journey that I've been on, the light sort of wondered its way in as well, right? I was on this sort of Chek journey and this expansion of holistic health and understanding and helping people. And during that, the Lucia light came up in the similar podcast that we were listening to, the Luke Story Experience podcast. And I listened to that episode. And as holistic health practitioners, there are so many different kinds of modalities that we could all experiment with and help people with, and they're all amazing. But much like everything in life, not all of them are going to fit us uniquely, or we're not going to be pulled to them. And so I'm always aware of that. And I was listening to this episode, and I was pulled to what was being said and shared about this specific device. And very simply, it's a photobiomodulation light frequency lamp that shines onto your forehead and induces deep states of meditation and what I call a communication with your higher self. So that in itself is exciting, right? And you're pulled towards it. And that was me. And I started experimenting with it, and I was trained as a practitioner, and now I offer services around it. But it's really interesting reflecting on it, because it's, for me, has been really adding to that foundation we were talking about before of connection to spirit and deep knowing. And for me, both within my experience with it, but mostly in what I've been seeing other people experience with it. Like the other day, for example, I had a lady here who'd never done any kind of meditation before, had never done any sort of biohacks, nothing. She did a 20-minute session with me, and she ended the session with these ancestors coming in. She was like, her eyes were closed, and she was reaching out to touch the people that she thought was physically in the room because she felt them so impactfully. So it's just, it's a connection to a deep sort of spiritual realm, and it's really interesting.
Do you understand much about the science behind the Lucia light? Like, do you know what wavelengths of light? Is it like a red light, an infrared?
It's multiple. So I know bits and pieces of it, and quite honestly, I haven't gone into too much of the science, because for me it takes a little bit away from it, because the things that I've seen come out of it aren't scientific. Mm-hmm. Like they're not. You wouldn't count them in the scientific realm. So, but answer to your question, it's many different light frequencies. So it's not just red light. It's a full spectrum. It's changing all the time.
Is that different than just like a full spectrum halogen light bulb? Just put it right up to my face and...
Yeah. It's different in the way that it's fluctuating, right? So the intensity changes, the flicker rate changes, the distance in time changes. So yeah, if you got an indoor lighting, you could probably do something like it, but there's something more going on for sure.
But the way it works is that by changing the frequency and the flicker and the wavelength, all that together activates the pineal gland?
Yes, that's part of it. For anyone that's interested, I would recommend the book The Brain's Way of Healing by Norman Deutsch. And it goes into the neuroplastic neural pathway idea of how the brain is always changing and changing and adapting and evolving. And one of the ways it can do that, and one of the ways we can promote neuroplastic change within the brain specifically, is through light frequency, light healing devices. And the light itself is acting on that pathway. It's activating the neuroplastic nature of the brain to both heal and adapt and connect to the pineal gland.
That's very cool. And in general, when you're going about evaluating a new biohacking device, toy, what have you, there's so many out there, and some of them are quite expensive. A lot of them seem questionable. What convinced you that this was going to be a real, like, powerful device and not just some sham?
So it goes back to what I was saying before around having an intuitive feeling, right? So there are many things, like I said, that we can listen to about all these devices that we can tune into. And I would encourage anyone that is in this world to have the thinking mind there, but don't let the thinking mind be the final choice. The thinking mind is going to be stuck in a lot of fear sometimes. And our deeper knowing, our intuitive sense is the one that's going to lead the way to the things that are going to be the most impactful for both us or other people or both. So that's how I landed on it. I listened to the episode, I thought about it a little bit, and then I felt about it a little bit. And then a couple of really weird coincidences happened, and that was it. And I was just on the path. And I kept, to answer your question again, when those thoughts kept coming up, right? Because it didn't just end there. Like as I was practicing and learning, doubts came up. I was like, oh, maybe this isn't the thing for me. I kept tuning back into my inner feeling, and my inner feeling kept shining bright and kept having a good experience with it.
I find the same thing, that when I listen to my intuition, things go well. But if I doubt it and go cerebral and listen to my brain instead, a lot of times I regret it and realize in hindsight that my gut was right.
I don't know if you're up to this yet in your training in the Chek system, but Paul talks about this in terms of there's really only two main choices we can ever make, right? It's the ego choice or the soul intuitive choice, right? And how we know we've made the ego choice is exactly what you're saying, right? It might feel good in the present moment, i.e. it might be a quick pleasure or hit of something, but if we keep down that path, we're eventually going to get to a point of resistance where it feels difficult to keep going or things go wrong. If we make the soul choice, it doesn't mean that things aren't going to be hard, but it means that as we go along that hardship, we're supported by a guidance or a love or something bigger than ourselves that helps us keep going.
And what do you say to people that come to you and say, "Oh yeah, my soul was telling me to eat this bag of chips, eat these donuts"?
I would say that's not their soul. Because it's the other good thing about that soul path is that it's never innately going to be harmful. Again, things are going to be challenging, but it's always for your best and highest evolution and consciousness. And we know that eating a packet of refined oils and sugars and all the things, that's not good for any kind of consciousness.
Now that you've gone through Lucia training and you're practicing it with other people, what's top of mind for you today? What are you interested in researching?
Like the biohacking side of things in terms of new gadgets and stuff. Like at the moment, I'm trying out
Apollo?
the Apollo at the moment. And that's probably on my mind at the moment in terms of like the techie side of things. But I've spent most of my years just gathering knowledge. And now I'm at the point where, people coming to see me, people are being helped and supported, and I'm seeing people transform and all these things. And now I'm just iterating on all of the knowledge and the base that I have. We know that knowledge is powerful, but implemented knowledge is the next step, right? So where I'm at now is I'm just enjoying the ride. Like I'm enjoying the ride of just evolving slowly with the people I get to help, modifying slightly, changing things up, adding my unique voice into things, shifting, listening, feeling, adding the intuition, adding the light. And I guess in answer to your question, I am at a point now where I'm just sitting back and letting go and trusting. And then I'm sure within a month's time, 2 months' time, something else is going to drop down. Like, oh, I'm going to go add that to my world of things. But in this moment, I'm just in a point of gratitude, trust, and letting things roll.
It takes discipline to stop learning, to sit back and say, okay, now it's time to integrate all these
Yeah.
things I'm learning and to not get caught up in the latest new gadgets and fancy gizmos, and then to enrich the lives of others with the information you've learned. Because if it's siloed away on your computer in your mind, it does the rest of the world no good.
100%. And like I just mentioned, I think it can be very easy for us to become a parrot, right? We can become a parrot of all the knowledge we had. And I'm not, if people are doing that, I'm not disparaging that. I do that too. But we all have our unique voice, right? We all have our unique power and our reason for being on this place, on this world, on this journey. And if we don't sit and integrate like you're saying, then we don't give the information enough time to be circumvented with our unique expression, right? So I can learn about the Lucia light from a podcast and about all these people, but how am I adding my unique voice, my unique power through it? Because at the end of the day, these things are all tools, right? They're all tools, and any tool you can either hit yourself in the head with, or you can make a masterpiece, and that masterpiece is dictated by your unique expression.
I also am wearing currently an Aura Ring, a BioStrap, a Garmin, and a NutriSense continuous glucose monitor at the moment. So I'm ready to take a step back from all the gadgets and say, okay, time to make use of all this.
I think it's the amazing thing about the time we live in, right? We can do all these things, right? We can track our glucose levels on the dime, and I'm very jealous of that because I can't access it here. So that's next on my list. But it's about going back to yin and yang and back to the balance, right? Get lost in those things, get lost in those technologies, learn about them, but come back to your center and then move from there so they don't become another addiction. Because unfortunately, while these things are amazing, anything we can get lost in, including all these biohacks. And if we don't have self-awareness of that, then it suddenly doesn't have the power that we're looking for.
I'm at the point now where had my fun with them and getting ready to downsize and keep only the bare necessities.
Sorry to keep going on about this topic, but it's just so important, right? And especially in the world we're in. I think it's okay to have fluctuations of that too, right? Like to have periods of your life where you're all in on these sort of technology, and then have stages where you do step back. You go out in nature for a month and just detach from everything, and then come back in. Like life is not static. Life is dynamic and fluctuating based off our needs and the world's needs, and that's fine. That's normal, in my opinion.
What is something that you find yourself going against the grain on? Are there any particular subjects or topics?
I think there's a bit of fear in me. Like I think in the journey that I'm on right now, I think there's a lot of fear of going against the grain because I'm growing, right? I'm expanding, I'm more clients and all the good stuff. But I guess there's a bit of fear at the moment of there are some things that I do want to speak out about. And I think, definitely one thing comes to mind at the moment that I won't get into that's connected to this past year events, but choice. I think the power of choice is something that I think a lot of us can get stuck in and can feel like that we don't have a choice. Like, for example, again, this last year of events, I think a lot of us have felt like we're out of control, right? We're out of control with everything that's going on. And I'm not taking away from all the events. There's been a lot of things that have justifiably happened that we should be that we should be mindful of. But at the same time, I think choice comes into this. And choice comes into the role of standing into your own power and in your own sovereignty and realizing what is good for me and what isn't. Your opinions, we could talk about opinions all day about what is right or wrong, but at the end of the day, you need to pick things that are important to you and how you feel in this given moment. And we know we're always changing. We're evolving all the time. And what's good for me now might not be good for me next week or a month from now. But it's important to always rest in the power of the choice that we have for our own well-being. And I guess in answer to your question, I really push back against the people that think they don't have a choice. And we do. We always have a choice. It might be hard at the time, but we always have that power. We just need to stand in it and then take the next step and the next step after that.
And sometimes the most powerful choices can be the small ones that seem insignificant.
100%. And then that comes into the comparison game, right? We fear of making a small choice because it isn't as impactful as what Harrison did or what Nick did or what whoever did. And that makes us feel like we shouldn't make it because it's not deserving. But that goes back to you, right? It's your story, your life that's unfolding, and any choice that you make, small or large, is you progressing forward.
Earlier in your career, if you go against the grain too soon, it can be catastrophic. If you look back, a lot of the people who pioneered their respective fields were ostracized and criticized for long, long periods of time, sometimes decades after their death. And only then did their wisdom become popular knowledge. So there's a balance there.
And on that anecdote, those people still kept going, right? Even in the intensity of the backlash and the feedback and the negativity and the censorship and all the things, they kept going. They kept making steps because they knew it was true for them. And the people that connected to their message connected to them regardless of how other people saw them. And that's the other thing, right? We're never going to be able to please every single person, right? There's going to be people listening to this conversation that are going to be, yelling at what I have to say or what you have to say. And there's going to be people loving it. And it's not our responsibility for both ends of those things. It's our responsibility to come from a place of unconditional love and truth for what we stand for. And then what happens from there is what happens from there.
Because of the negativity bias, it's easy to get 10 emails saying, oh, I loved this segment, this clip, this show, and then just to scroll down and see the one negative comment and you think, oh, why am I even doing this? I'm wasting my time, everyone's time.
I think everyone on social media has experienced that to some degree, and it's human nature, right? It's what the news industry runs on. The news industry runs on fear. It's because we are evolutionarily and ancestrally predisposed to be looking out for our safety right around us. But now our body hasn't caught up to the fact that fear that originally was probably a saber-toothed tiger or something that was actually going to kill us. Now it's negative comments on a podcast episode. And we get pulled to that. But I think that's where the self-awareness comes in, and you need to bring mindful intention. It's like, okay, I'm fine right now. My life is good. This one negative comment isn't going to destroy everything. And my message and my voice is still true to me.
I think one of the biggest reasons people watch news is they're afraid of being left behind, which is a bit of a fallacy. I'm guessing that you don't watch the news regularly. I know I don't, and I still hear about all the latest happenings that are relevant. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's a big one. So, yes, I don't. I don't watch the news, and I agree with you. I think for me, for a long time, when this all started happening with this last year's events, I was the person that had the apps on my phone to purely stay up to date because of the industry I was in and lockdowns and things like that. But then to your point, I very quickly realized not only the psychological and emotional mental impacts that was having on my well-being, but I also realized that when I disconnected, that I suddenly everything didn't stop, and that I was still in the loop, and that things were still fine, and I talked to people and understood where it was all at. So it's 100% that what you're saying. It's us having a fear of not missing out, but it's unwarranted because we're not going to miss out. And if we have close connections and we have people that we care about, we're going to make a way to stay in touch with them, regardless of the news or not.
What you just said made me think about Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and he's shown that at certain times of the day, namely in the morning, right after you wake up, and right before sleep, you become more suggestible as your brain's in alpha brainwaves. And when you're in those brainwaves and you're scrolling through news, that information is embedding deeper into your subconscious than it would if you were to watch it at middle of the day, for example.
100%. Yeah, it's really interesting you bring up Joe Dispenza. I'm deep right now in his Becoming Supernatural book, and I'm just addicted to all like the energetic centers and all of it. And yeah, it's true, right? We need to change our understanding of what we see news as. It's another type of food that we're taking in. And like food is not only energy, it's information, right? When we eat an apple versus when we eat a chocolate bar, that is giving our internal operating system different kinds of information. And the same is with news or a podcast that we feel uplifted by. We're taking in different kinds of information, and we need to be aware of what the quality of that information is.
I don't know if you've come across it yet, but in that same book, in Becoming Supernatural, he talks about the opposite of news, a concept called mind movies. And when you're in those hyper suggestible states, rather than pulling up content that incites fear and worry, it does the opposite. It reprograms your subconscious with affirmations and positive visuals and sounds.
We could do another podcast on this, but it's the idea of creating the reality that you want, and how at the end of the day, the very substance of what we are is energy, right? It's energy, and emotions create a specific energy, and we pull in this present moment. If we're on a specific frequency of emotion and energy, such as gratitude, joy, happiness, with that mind movie that you're talking about, so we pull in more of those frequencies and experiences into our present day reality. And the whole quantum realm and things is still something that I am slowly getting my head around, but it's true, right? We see it. If we sit in it long enough, I can confidently say that my present day reality and what I'm doing now, what I've manifested in terms of my business, my holistic health, all the things that I manifested because I knew what I wanted and I made the steps and consciously, like we're saying, consciously brought in the information that served that.
Harrison, we can talk for hours, but we're running low on time tonight. Where can my audience find you if they're interested in connecting or working with you?
First of all, Nick, I just wanted to say thank you for having me. This has been an absolute pleasure. I think it's probably been picked up from the conversation that like-minded souls, right? And I appreciate you giving me this platform that you've created for us to just talk about this, because like you said, I could talk about this all day, and I appreciate that my path crossed with yours. So that's what I wanted to say first. Second, people can reach out to me on most social media. It's Harrison Meagher, spelled Meagher, at Harrison Meagher, both on Instagram, Facebook. I'm on Clubhouse a lot, a little bit of LinkedIn and Twitter. And you can also go to my website, harrisonmeagher.com, and reach out onto me either in the DMs or book a session. I'm always looking for new clients.
I do have one final question for you, and it's a question I ask all guests on Mind Body Peak Performance. Imagine that all information is wiped off Earth. There's nothing left, but you get to choose 3 pieces of content to keep. They can be anything from any teacher. What would they be?
How to Eat, Move, and Be Healthy by Paul Chek. It's a book that started me down this path that I'm on right now. I would also say the book Boundless by Ben Greenfield, another really just comprehensive encyclopedia of all things health and wellness. And the third one, this is sort of more personal just to me, my journey, but I think it applies, is any of the Graham Hancock episodes on the Joe Rogan Experience. And specifically because for me, it taught me to start thinking for myself, start thinking about what things apply to me. Not, I grew up in an education system that taught me what to think, not how to think. And that podcast shifted that for me. It shifted to me, okay, I am my own being. I can trust my beliefs and my systems, and there are different ways of thinking out there, and I can seek them out.
Very nice. Well, I sense a round two in our near future on any one of many topics. But for now, it's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Oh, so excited. I can already feel the next conversation. And thank you for having me, Nick. It's been a pleasure.
I hope that this has been helpful for you. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and hit the thumbs up. I love knowing who's in the 1% committed to reaching their full potential. Comment 1% below so that I know who you are. For all the resources and links, meet me on my website at mindbodypeak.com. I appreciate you and look forward to connecting with you. As a reminder, the information depicted in this video is for information purposes only. Please consult your primary healthcare professional before making any lifestyle changes.